kind. He is a wizard, a whiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does.
It was a warm spring night, and I sat at the table of the terrace at the hotel after Robert had gone, watching it get dark, and the electric signs come on, and the red and green stop and go to traffic signals, and the crowd go by, and the horse cabs clippity-clopping along the edge of the solid taxi traffic.
Visual imagery here presents the notion that the protagonist is largely fixated with the material, a philosophy which presents a sense of psychological isolation. The observer's notation of the noises made by traffic and its motion creates an idea of vivacious stagnancy. Such stagnancy is a symptom of expatriation, as the average expatriate fails to integrate with his new environment and largely remains an observer.
Spending the last couple of seconds in silence and enjoying the last of the lukewarm air in the vents, I opened the door, hustling towards the entrance, stepping in a frozen puddle, which crackled beneath my foot. With feeling leaving my fingers, I grasped the cold door handle, ripping open the rusty hinges with a squeak. The familiar musty smell immediately filled my nostrils. He sat in the outer room and read the papers, the editor and the publisher, and I worked hard for 2 hours. Then I sorted the carbons, stamped on a byline, and put in a couple of big manila envelopes and rang for the boys to take them down to the street. I went out to the other rooms, and there was Robert Cohn asleep in a big chair. He was asleep with his head in his arms. I did not wake him up, but I did not want to lock him in the office. I put my hand on his shoulder.
Here, the organic nature of the imagery, involving the protagonist's retreat into accompanied solitude, demonstrates a deep desire for companionship, as well as a massive rift that exists between himself and his inner desires. The temptation of drinking, sex, and companionship linger over him, trumping his need to organize feelings and emotions in a state of restless creativity. Within the dim room, a maroon light revealed the detail of the leaflets lining the walls among trophies of Veronese threes. Expediently taped, yet completely thought through, the collection of type-faced manuscript flyaways dwelled on the wall in a manner to suggest that their author would not be returning. The deep scent of the acidic tapes on the wall seeped to each maroon corner of the abandoned studio, the dust falling from the perpetually rotating ceiling fan like a downy snow upon the paper stock.
We walked on and circled the island. The river was dark, and a boat went by, all bright lights, going fast and quiet, up and out of the sight under the bridge. Down the river was Notre Dame, squatting against the night sky. We crossed over to the left bank by the Seine, by the wooden footbridge from the road, and stopped on the bridge. The island looked dark. The houses were high against the sky, and the trees were shadows.
Kinesthetic descriptions of the surroundings of Paris evoke a sense of false security attained by the observation of movement in relation to oneself that masquerades as integration. Such a movement of false integration exemplifies the idea that the protagonist cannot relate to anyone or anything, as his life has revolved around perpetual motion to ensure survival.
About 7:30, we had dinner and watched the country through an open window in the diner. It was a sandy pine country full of heather. There were little clearings with houses in them, and once in a while we passed a sawmill. It got dark, and we could feel the country hot and sandy and dark outside the window. It was about 9 o'clock when we got to Bayonne.
In this passage, Hemingway's application of visual imagery serves to promote a sense of isolationism, even though he is physically near to the people and landmarks. The superficial notation of simple aspects of the landscape illustrate the thought processes the protagonist possesses behind his own life story. He views it as a still life, as a series of scenes through which he merely passes. Such psychologically torturous description spurs the feeling of desolation within the Parisian setting.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when we're living our dream.
We drove out along the coast road. There was the green of the headlands, the white, red-roofed villas, patches of forest, and the ocean very blue with the tide out and the water curling far out along the beach. Color imagery describes how refreshing a new atmosphere is and its restoring effects on the tortured soul, although these effects are fleeting. The vivid description foreshadows the eventuality that this location will soon become as drab as Paris in the protagonist's mind, illustrating a need for equilibrium. The pain of stagnation in Paris is contrasted by the anguish of dwindling pleasure of motion in Spain.
Softly and smoothly, and then stopped, and staring squarely in front of the bull, offered him the cape. The bull's tail went up and charged, and Romeo moved his arms ahead of the bull, wheeling, his feet firm. The dampened, mud-weighted cape swung open as full as a sail, and Romeo pivoted just ahead of the bull. At the end of the pass, they were both facing each other once again.
Kinesthetic description of the act of bullfighting describes the awe experienced by the spectators, as well as the protagonist's desire to attain as much control over his life as the matador has over the bull.
At the time, there was music in the streets. The drums kept pounding, the pipes were going. Inside the cafe, men with their hands on the table or on each other's shoulders were singing their hard-voiced singing.
Auditory imagery extracts the bliss that the protagonist wishes he could derive. The passage serves as a taunt towards the protagonist, as if the world mocks him for not being able to successfully integrate into any environment, as he remains stoic while the fiesta constantly shifts.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
It was hot, but the town had a cool, fresh early morning smell, and it was pleasant sitting in the cafe. A breeze started to blow, and you could feel the air that came off the sea. There were pigeons out in the square, and the houses were yellow, sun-baked color. I did not want to leave the cafe.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
The Norte station in Madrid is the end of the line. All trains finish there. They don't go on anywhere. Outside were cabs and taxis and a line of hotel runners. It was like a country town. I took a taxi and we climbed through the gardens, by the empty palace and by the unfinished church at the edge of the cliff. And on we went until we were high, hot, modern town.
The foreign nature of each visual experience conveyed through imagery is also intimately familiar to the protagonist, as he sees the unfinished church at the edge of the cliff and the empty palace as symbols of his former life and a reminder of the closure he will never feel as he is unable to return to his home.
Noshing on such a simplistically satisfying meal, I let my mind wander. Pensively, I visually explore the landscape. The clouds roll lackadaisically overhead, engulfing the peaks of the mountain range we are on. Across the shimmering lake, our hotel stands proudly atop a hill, 3 bulls in the yard. The occasional moo wafts over the water. Looking further yet, the mountains on the opposite side of the valley loom blue, hazy, and foreboding in the distance, and yet they only enhance my euphoria.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool